Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to look into today is, let's just say, a very odd one. It is the case of Ed Gein, who was also known as the Butcher of Plainfield, and his gruesome crimes have just inspired so many books, so many movies, so many characters, especially horror films. I probably should do a warning here. In fact, I'm definitely going to do a warning here. This case, let's just say, is pretty gruesome, and it is definitely more intended for mature viewers. So if these gruesome and gory cases aren't for you, then that's fine. You know, go and find a different video of mine if you want to carry on watching me, and just pick a different one, because this one is pretty bad. This kind of case just isn't for everyone, and that is okay. So, have you ever watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Or do you know of the character Norman Bates in the book and movie Psycho? Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill, anyone? Does any one of these characters ringing a bell to anyone? Well, they're all based off Ed Gein. Yeah. Loosely based off him. You know, they're not fully based off him, but just generally, his crimes and what he did gave them the ideas for these characters. I guess he really inspired horror writers just because of the stuff that he did it is like out of a movie. Like, you will be thinking, is this actually real? Because honestly, it's just unbelievable. And in this case, it actually is real. So let's just get stuck in. This case was suggested by Ian, and thank you so much for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, but I found this case really interesting. I'm kind of on a journey of learning about all these cases myself, because I know of some of them, but there's a lot that I actually don't know, and this was one of them. So I found it very interesting to look into. If you guys have any more suggestions, let me know. I will look into them for you, of course. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone I talk about. I've just got this information from the internet to compile into a video for educational purposes. Edward Theodore Gein was born on the 27th of August in 1906 to parents George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelm Gein, and they lived in La Crosse County in Wisconsin. Now, Ed also had an older brother called Henry George Gein. And to get an idea behind what is Ed, we have to go into his parents' lives and his sort of childhood. So George was orphaned at a young age, and that is like really sad, because I believe he was only 3 when he watched his parents get swept away in this flash flood in the Mississippi, and they unfortunately drowned, his mother, his father, and his sister. So he was left orphaned at the age of 3, having witnessed that because he was there. He was brought up by his grandparents, and from a very young age he got addicted to alcohol. I guess he used that as a coping mechanism, I don't really know. And he was addicted to alcohol. He would be addicted to alcohol for the rest of his life. He was described as this strong, straight man with this really dignified manner. And then in his mid-20s, George meets his future wife. Augusta had been brought up in a very strict household. She had to go by these very strict rules, and to make sure that she kept in with these rules, her father would regularly beat her just to ensure that, you know, she stuck by what he was saying, because otherwise she would get beaten. Also, they had very strong religious views, and Augusta was a very strongly religious woman. She was described as being very intimidating, very fierce, and very dominating. When she met George, she would literally control the entire household, and she did, well, everything really. But I guess she had to, because George was often drunk. If he wasn't working, it said that he was drunk, so she did have to step up, and she did have to control everything. Although I really do believe that that is the way she liked it, because she was just that kind of woman. It was said that George did have many jobs. He was a carpenter, he was a sales insurance man, he was working on a railroad, but he couldn't really keep hold of a job because of his alcoholism and how often he would be drunk. And then even when he did have his money from said job, he would just go and spend it all on booze. The pair got married, and it was said that Augusta liked George because he was this pushover. She could control him, she could dominate him, and that is how she liked it. And George liked Augusta because, well, I'm actually not really sure, to be honest. But let's just say their marriage was very love-lacking. It was not a good marriage, definitely not. They were not a good pair to be together, and yet, because Augusta was so religious, she wouldn't get divorced, and so they were just stuck in this marriage of where they didn't even really like each other. George, when he got really drunk, he would often beat Augusta, and she wasn't entirely a victim in this. So yes, she was a victim of his beatings. I'm not saying that she wasn't, but she would be verbally abusive to him, calling him worthless dog and in public as well and things like that. So she gave as good as she got in a sense. I'm obviously not saying that she wasn't a victim, because she was, but so was he. On the occasions that she'd been beaten, she would get down on her hands and knees and she would pray to God that he would kill her husband. So yeah, that happened. I would have thought that somebody was religious wouldn't really pray for God to kill their husband, but there you go, that's what she did. As you can see, it's just a terrible situation all round, and they just stayed in the marriage because of her religion. So that was just their life from now on, as awful as it was. Augusta did still want a family though, and in 1902 their son Henry was born. Augusta did really struggle to bond with him, and she wanted a second chance, so she thought that if she had another child, maybe she would bond better with this child, and she really wanted a girl. So this time she would pray to God that he would bless her with a little girl and that maybe she would bond better with her, which I don't really understand, because what you will learn about Augusta, which I will tell you in a little bit, I don't know why she wanted a girl. Anyway, she prayed and prayed for God to bless her with a daughter, and her son Edward was born in 1906. Initially, again, she didn't accept him. It took a while for her to accept her children, and again, she wanted a girl, so she would have been mad that God probably hadn't blessed her with the girl she wanted, and that she had another son, and she hadn't even properly bonded with the first son yet. So there you go. But she quickly realised that she now had two little boys who she could mould and pretty much brainwash into the perfect human being as she saw it. And so now she didn't care whether she had a boy or a girl. She could bring up these boys exactly how she wanted, and that is what she did. Now on to the part as to why I didn't understand why Augusta wanted a girl. Well, she actually hated women. Like, despised women. Except herself, of course, duh. She went on to say that they were all born as harlots, but not her, don't forget that. You know, she wasn't a harlot. I guess she was the only one that wasn't. She did also hate men too, so it wasn't just the women, she hated men too. She thought that they were all foul-mouthed and just used women for sex. So basically, she just hated everyone. I mean, she hates men, she hates women, there's no one else left. But now she had these two boys that she could form into whoever she wanted them to be. The perfect human being, I guess, in her eyes. In 1915, she forced her husband to leave the sinkhole of filth, as she called it, that was La Crosse County, and they went on to move to a 155-acre farmhouse in the town of Plainsfield, Wisconsin. She thought that would be a more worthy place to live for her and her golden boys, I guess. She really did think that the town was having a bad influence on them and how she was bringing up her children, her perfect children, and she just wanted out of there. She kept the boys away from anything that she deemed as sinful, which it was just pretty much everything really, especially those sinful, whore-ish women, as she called them. She thought that all women were prostitutes and were instruments of the devil. As I said, the farm was really isolated, so it pretty much meant that she was able to isolate them as much as she wanted. There's not really any neighbours around, there wasn't really any people around too much. So the boys were, if they weren't in the house, in the farm or on the land doing odd jobs here and there and working it, they were in school, and that was it. They were only allowed after school, and then as soon as they did school, they'd come home and they would have the chores to do, and then that was that. They were just stuck in the house. So Edward growing up was bullied. People considered him as weird, and he had like this droopy eye, so people would take the mickey out of how he looked, which is awful, and kids can be really cruel, and they were cruel to him. He was described as being very shy with these strange mannerisms, and they said that these strange mannerisms, so he would be sat at the back of the classroom and then all of a sudden he would just burst out laughing, and then people would be like, what are you laughing at? And he would just say that it was his own inside jokes, which, I mean, doesn't everyone do that? Well, apparently not then, but it is not, it's seen as normal now. Ed didn't have many friends, and if he did make some friends, and Augusta found out about it, oof, she would go mental. So then I guess he just wanted to please his mother, and he just wouldn't make friends then after that. So the boys didn't really have any outside contact with, you know, very many people. Like I said, they went to school and that was pretty much it. George would often get drunk and he would come home and he would beat Augusta and the boys. And Augusta wasn't really affectionate towards them. I guess through the lack of social contact with other people and how his mother was, Edward became literally obsessed with her. He would say that she was his best friend, she was his one true love, his first love, and as I said, he was just totally obsessive over her. No matter what he did though, was never good enough for Augusta, which is just sad. Like, he worshipped the ground she walked on, and he was never good enough. At the age of 14, Ed left school and he went to work on the farm full time, which was probably another very big mistake, not that he would have known at the time, because now he was just there at home with his mother and his family, and his radicalised family at that, and he just had no outside contact whatsoever. On the 1st of April in 1940, George actually passes away. He was 66 years old at the time, and it was due to heart failure, believed to be, to do with his drinking. So the boys step up. They begin to try to help with the cost of living and things like that, and they pick up these odd jobs in town. They go around town, they do these odd jobs. They were said that they were really hard workers. People kind of respected them for the work that they did. And then Henry began dating this single mother of 2, and they were planning on moving in with each other. Now, Augusta must have been fuming at that because, again, all women were prostitutes in her eyes and she hated them all. But now one of her sons was, dating and moving on with his life and getting out there, living his own life, really. He was starting a new life, and Ed was just still stuck at home with his mum, not really speaking to anyone, not ever having had a relationship. Just, it's not healthy. It wasn't healthy for him, and he began to realise that. And he had a conversation with him. They talked about their mother, and he said some things about Augusta, which Ed, he wasn't appreciative of, and it made him really mad. On the 16th of May in 1944, the boys were on the farm, and I believe they were burning brush that was just kind of overgrown brush. They were just trying to get rid of it. So they're burning all this brush, and then the fire suddenly gets out of hand. The fire department attend, and they manage to put out the fire. Now, Henry is missing. So Ed is like, where's Henry gone? Apparently he doesn't know where he's gone. So the police come, and the firemen, and then all of a sudden, Ed just takes them straight to Henry, who he didn't know where he was. Don't forget that. But he just walked straight over to where Henry's dead body is now lying. And I don't know. He's dead, but there's no burns on his body. There's nothing to say that he was caught in the fire. And it looked like he'd been dead for some time. He was lying face down, and when they looked into it, they thought it was due to heart failure as to why he passed away. It was later reported, though, that there were these bruises on the back of his head. And it was strange. It was strange. If he's died of a heart attack, why does he have bruises on the back of his head? Why does he have marks on the back of his head? The police dismissed that any foul play had gone down, and they ruled it as an accident. The coroner would later list asphyxiation as his cause of death. Now I know what you're thinking, and I'm thinking the same thing. He didn't die in the fire. He had no burns. There are these strange bruises on the back of his head. He just, I don't know the timeline, but before that he'd had an argument with his brother, who was going out, starting a new life, and was calling his mother out on what she was doing and trying to get Ed out of there, who he adored, and it made him really angry. And now suddenly Henry is dead. I wonder who done it. And then of course there was, Ed was able to lead them straight to the body, even though he didn't know where he was. But yeah, he just walked straight there. How did he do that? Pretty suspicious, right? Well, there's no proof that he actually did kill his brother. It would all just be speculation, so I can't confirm or deny that. But with all of everything that you're going to learn as to what Ed actually did, it is very highly likely that he, in fact, did kill his brother. And that possibly his brother was his first victim. Again, speculation. We don't know that. But, it's pretty likely. Ed didn't really mourn his brother's passing too much, neither did Augusta. Ed seemed to be happy to have his mother all to himself, and Augusta still had her favourite son. So, win-win, I guess, in their eyes at least. A few months later, Augusta suffered a stroke, which left her pretty much paralysed on one side, and she was pretty much bedridden after that. And Ed, her loving son, who would do anything for her, was there at her beck and call, day and night, by her bedside, just doing everything for her. He took care of her. He did everything for her. And she was still awful to him. She would call him a weakling and would say that he couldn't survive without her. I mean, he was just so dedicated to her to get all that abuse and stuff and then still look after her. On the 29th of December in 1945, Augusta dies. She was aged 67 and she left her 39-year-old son, Ed, utterly devastated because he, again, he worshipped the ground that she walked on. He had now lost his only friend and his one true love. Ed was now absolutely alone in the world. You know, his brother had died, his father had died, his mother had died. He was the only one left. And there was just a downward spiral after that. The farmhouse that they were living in was big. You know, it was a big house, and now he was the only one living it. So he basically boxed off all the rooms. He boarded them all up, apart from 2, I believe. He went on to leave his mother's, Augusta's room, immaculate. So he did board it off, but he left it exactly how she left it. So it was like a shrine to her in a sense. Like, I guess his way of keeping her alive. It was just exactly how she left it. So he boards that up. He boards the rest of the house up, and then I don't know what happened. It was just full of trash. It was messy. It was dirty, and there was just trash everywhere. Kind of like nowadays what you think of maybe as a hoarder. Maybe that's what he was. But there was just stuff everywhere. It was just an absolute tip. No one really saw much of Ed after that. He obviously did make his appearances, you know, he would still do odd jobs around town, he still had to earn a living. He would only really be seen like when he was out running errands or doing a bit of work, or sometimes he would stop at a local tavern, which was owned by Mary Hogan. Now, Ed liked Mary. She reminded him of his mother. And as I said, he was a bit of a strange guy, which is fine, you know, weird, strange. Whoever you want to be is whoever you want to be. I'm not saying that that is not allowed, but obviously when that becomes murderous is when it's... Ed liked Mary, and he would just sit and stare at her, which is really creepy, but I guess she understood. Some of the few odd jobs that he took on around town included babysitting. Apparently he got on quite well with children. Like, I don't know whether they were in kind of the same mindset or something like that, I don't know, but he would also babysit the town's children. The town thought he was odd, yes, but he was harmless. And I mean, that just goes to show with them letting him babysit the kids. You're not going to let somebody you thought would harm anyone babysit your children. Ed began picking up like hobbies at home, so he would read true crime stories. He would read comics and magazines, but they were all kind of to do with horror. He really enjoyed reading books about cannibalism and grave robbing, and he really got into reading about the human anatomy and things like that. And he read so many books on these. Ed would also like to read the obituaries, you know, just for fun, which is very, very weird, but whatever floats your boat. Now, one day, Mary Hogan goes missing. She leaves behind just a pool of blood in her tavern. This man walks into the tavern. He sees money on the floor. He sees shell casings on the floor, and he sees blood everywhere. And obviously, there is no sign of Mary whatsoever. So he calls the police. Police come around and they do an investigation. They try and find Mary. They try and find anything they can. Unfortunately, they don't find anything. Mary just vanished and nobody knew what had happened to her. People would still go in the tavern for a beer and they would speculate as to what had happened to Mary. Ed would go in and he would also speculate as to what would happen to Mary. And he would be like, oh, she's just at my house. And everyone was just thinking, oh, harmless Ed. You know, maybe that was a tasteless joke, but he would never harm anyone, right? Then on the 16th of November in 1957, 57-year-old widow Bernice Warden disappears. Frank Warden, who was a son, stops by at the hardware store which she owned and ran, and it was about midday and she wasn't there, which was abnormal for her. The store was always open. If she went out, I guess she'd leave a note or something. She would tell somebody as to why it was closed or whatever, but it was left open and the back door was left open and she just wasn't around, and it was very, very strange. He goes inside and he sees a trail of blood behind the cash register that leads outside, and then it just stops. It just doesn't carry on anywhere. That's it. So now he's worried. He goes back to the cash register, I don't know, to try and find anything, and he sees a receipt for a half gallon of antifreeze made out to Ed Gein. Straight away he thinks that Ed has done something to her because there's no other receipts after that. So it's just that one, and then apparently she got no more customers after that, possibly because she wasn't there anymore, and therefore, you know, the most likely thing was that Ed had done something to her. He calls the police, he tells them everything he knows. The police come out, they look around, and they decide to then go to the farm because their suspicions are along the same lines. Ed wasn't home, so some of the officers go out to find Ed, whilst the others decide to look inside the farmhouse. And oh boy, were they in for a shock. Seriously, it is terrible what they found. Let me just give you another warning here. What I'm about to discuss is very graphic and just disgusting, really. So yeah, if you don't want to see all that, I'm going to put a timestamp up so that you can miss out the discussion of the contents of his house, because it's a lot and it is very gory and gruesome. Inside, it was very dark, it was very dirty, and it just stunk. There was trash and junk all over the floor. So obviously the officers, with it being dark, they had the flashlights and they don't want to trip over the junk on the floor. So they're shining it down to the floor to make sure that they can not fall over. So they're walking in through the door. One officer goes through the door. He's shining on the floor, and something brushes past his shoulder, and he's thinking, you know, what was that? So he turns around, shines his flashlight on it, and he finds the body of Bernice Warden hanging upside down from her feet from the rafters. That is not the worst of it. As bad as that is, it is not the worst of it. So she had been decapitated. All of her insides had been taken out, and she had been like hollowed out and cleaned inside, with a cut from her pelvis area all the way down to her chest area. And she'd just been kind of left there to drain like an animal in an abattoir, I guess. The officer ran outside and basically puked up, and who can blame him? Can you imagine finding that? Can you imagine going in a house looking for Bernice and then finding that strewn up like a skinned animal? Oh my gosh, it must have been so horrific. And there are actually some pictures of it too, so I'm not obviously going to put those in, but if you want to look that up, you can do. Nobody was really expecting to find that or anything that they went on to find. Like, literally nobody. So the police call for backup. They comb the rest of the house as they're obviously waiting for the backup, just basically trying to see if there's anything else they could find. And of course they wanted to find Bernice's head too, because that was missing. This house would become to be known as Ed Gein's House of Horrors. So as you can imagine, that ain't all they found in there. So the things that I'm about to describe, you may think that's not real, as I've said in the beginning, but trust me, it is real. There's the pictures. I mean, the pictures, you can fully look this up yourselves. I will put in some pictures, but I'm not going to put in like the more disturbing ones, because that stuff can ruin your day, let me just tell you. But trust me, this is real. He literally had these things in his house, and it's really sick. He was a very sick man. So here goes. They find human skulls, and they find lots of human skulls. Now, some of them had the tops cut off. Can you imagine what you could use a human skull for with the top cut off? Well, he used them, I guess, as soup bowls. Can you imagine having your chicken soup in a human skull? Oh, it's just gross. They found several chairs that had been upholstered, you know, but not in fabric or material or anything like that. It was human skin. Yes, human skin. He then went on to make lampshades out of flesh. I don't know where he got these ideas from, but yeah, he had flesh shades. He also made this belt that was made from nipples. Who looks at a nipple and thinks, I'm gonna make a belt out of that? It had its buckle on and everything. It was a full-on belt. It was like a belt full of nipples. No, Edward, just no. What? Why? They found lots of human bone fragments, a waste bin made of human skin. So not only did he have his lampshades, he had bins made out of them too. There was a box of 4 noses. So he just, I don't know, chopped off the nose and thought, I'll keep that in a box for a rainy day, I guess. Like what on earth for? Why would he want a box full of noses? You tell me. I just don't understand. They found 9 vulva in a shoebox, all dried up, women's genitalia. If anybody didn't know that, which I assume you do. They found a young girl's dress and another 2 female genitalia, which they assumed to be about the age of these girls, about 15 years old. So he had like this window shade, like, I don't know, shutters or something, like blinds. I don't know, but he had this window shade. And you know the drawstring that you pull when you're pulling it down? Well, he put a pair of lips on them. Like, a pair of lips on the drawstring just as decoration, I guess. I just don't get it. Like, why do you look at someone's lips and think, they're going on my window on that string so that I can pull my shades down? I don't know. On one wall of his house, they found the faces of 9 women. So I don't mean like the heads, I mean like the faces. He has skinned it, so he's peeled it off the skull like a mask, and they're just hanging on his wall. Was he like trying to cover the entire wall or something? He had 9 of them there. I mean, it's just insane. Or, as in Leatherface, did he wear them as masks? Like, he wanted to wear different women's faces as masks, and he would change them out. I don't know, but it's gross. There's more, let me tell you. They found this top that he'd been sewing together with different pieces of flesh. So it was all sewn up, different patches of a shirt, a top, whatever it was that he was trying to make. And he just put some breasts on them. So he chopped off someone's breasts and sewed them onto this top. I don't even know what to call it at this point. It was described as a mammary vest. So yeah, I guess it's a mammary vest. They also found these leggings that he'd made out of human skin, so I guess he's trying to make an outfit. I mean, it's not an outfit because it's a skin, but I guess to him it was an outfit. Let me explain. He was kind of trying to make a bodysuit. He had this corset made from a female torso, so I guess that was another outfit. Like, he would change them and just wear different things. So he would put on his outfit. He would go and get his mammary vest and put it on. He would get his leggings and put them on. He would get his gloves and put them on. Oh, I didn't mention the gloves. He made gloves out of human flesh again. He sewed it all together, and there's, I'll put a picture of them up. There's some human gloves. Human flesh gloves. He did that. He would then probably put on a woman's face and walk around pretending to be a woman. Oh, he would also stick like the genitalia that he had dried up in a box onto, just to make it, I guess, more realistic, more woman-like. And it was said that he was dressing up like this so that he could be closer to his mother. And he wanted to just kind of be his mother, I guess. And that is how he felt like she was still alive, in a sense. I mean, I just don't know, you guys. I don't know. They found skulls on his bedpost. So as he's there sleeping at night, he's got these skulls at the end of his bed. One officer opened this bag, this paper bag, and they pull out what they think is a wig, which, having known what they were finding, why would you just go and put your hand in a bag and pull out a wig? I mean, I wouldn't, but that's what they did. So anyway, they pull out this wig, and oh no, it wasn't a wig. So as they pull it out, the hair comes out with a face attached to it. Yeah, a face. So this face that was cut out with the hair still attached, like a mask, like a wig mask, I don't know, was the face of Mary Hogan. You remember the tavern owner that went missing? Yeah, that was her face. They also found tongs, fingernails, like so many fingernails. They opened the fridge and they found tons of human organs all stored inside. They found Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag on his potbelly stove. He apparently did refute that he had ever consumed any human meat. Whether that is the truth, I don't know. He had them in his fridge. He had the heart on his stove. I don't know. But he basically said that he never ate them. So make your own judgment on that as to whether you think he did. But he claims not to have. Although he did read a lot of books on cannibalism too. So I don't know. They believe that there were around 15 bodies found, you know, parts of bodies found in his house at around 4:30 a.m. after being there all day. So they're searching the house. Again, it was full of trash. So he was hiding stuff in weird places, and it was absolutely rammed with junk. So they would have been there all day looking through this. At 4:30 a.m. they find this burlap sack, and inside it they find the head of Bernice Warden. Now when they pull it out, they find that these nails have been put in both ears. And then this string, like, attaching them, you know, to each other, making a loop. Can you guess what he was going to do with that? Well, let me tell you, the police asked him, like, why has she got some nails in her head? What were you planning on doing with it? Oh, he was just going to hang it up on the wall as a decoration. Yeah, a decoration. Let me just say, as you've seen, I've put some of the less gruesome pictures in, like I said I would. There are so many more pictures out there that are so worse, so much more worse. And they're just, some of them are really, really gross and disgusting. So if you are interested in that and do want to look it up, I urge you to do so, because the police just let the press in there. They took pictures of everything straight away, and it's just all there. I mean, there are some movie props and things when you search it up, so don't get confused by that. Don't think that they are the real thing when they're not. But there are also a lot of them that are actually real. And because the press were in, it allows you to see those photos today, if you want to. So you can look up the nipple belt or the skin lampshades, and oh boy, are they something. Ed didn't really say much at first, but eventually he did admit to the murders of Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan. A little later on, I believe, for Mary Hogan. I think years down the line, actually. He asked for only one thing, a slice of apple pie with cheese on top, and then he would talk. The police got him that, and then he started talking. You may be thinking at this point, like, he only killed 2 people. That is who he admitted to killing. So how did he get, like, 15 bodies? Well, he was a grave robber. He lived close to a cemetery. Remember his hobby of reading the obituaries at night? Just for fun? Yeah, well, he would see that people around... He tried to do it around his mother's age, because, again, he was obsessed with her. So people around his mother's age that had recently died, that the funeral was soon, they were getting buried, he would go later on that night. I believe there was a friend Gus involved too, who would help him, who was working on the cemetery, I guess. And they would dig up the graves, he would pull out the bodies and he would take them home. And he would, I don't know, experiment on them, look into them. Apparently he was fascinated with how the human body works because of all the, anatomy books he'd read and everything that he'd read. He then wanted to take it one step further, and that was why he moved on to bodies and the dead. So he wanted to take them apart and just look at everything. Now the police did have to corroborate his story, so he took them to some gravestones that he'd actually dug up, and they found that in fact they were empty. So everything seemed to line up as to what he was saying. He said that basically the skin of the dead bodies was too dry and too difficult to work with, which is why he then went on to murdering people. He wanted fresh skin, he wanted it to be lovely, plump, moisturised, and, you know, supple, so that it was nice and easy to work with, to make his chairs out of, and his skin suits out of, I guess. Ed was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, but he did plead not guilty due to reasons of insanity, which I assume you will all agree with me on this one. You know, a lot of people try to plead insanity to lessen the sentence or to get away from jail time, but I think you will agree that he was definitely not right. He was a very, very sick man. From that, he was deemed as unfit to stand trial, as you would imagine, and he was sent to a Central State Hospital for psychiatric treatment. He stayed there for 10 years before they deemed him fit to stand trial, and within a week he was found guilty of first-degree murder. But again, he was sent back to the hospital because he was insane still. He could stand trial, but his verdict was just to send him back there because he was probably not safe in prison or anything like that. He was more safer for him to be there. As he's inside, they decide that for costing situations to do with Ed, they're going to sell his house, they're going to sell his properties and his possessions, and his car, things like that. They're going to all auction it off. And the town of Plainsfield really hated this house because it was classed as a house of horrors. And so there was a lot of bad juju around it. It was bringing in tourists that they didn't want. It was just a blight on the town in a sense. And so people hated it. And now it was going up for auction for somebody to buy to potentially have more tourism coming to see the House of Horrors. Well, basically the day before the auction was due to start, it set on fire and it burnt to the ground mysteriously. Arson was suspected, but again, they couldn't find any proof or, you know, who had done it. And so it burnt to the ground. Somebody went in and told Ed that his house had burned to the ground, and he replied with, just as well. And I agree, to be honest. Yeah, it was probably the best that house was eradicated for the town of Plainsfield. Ed stayed locked up for the rest of his life in the institute, and then on the 26th of July in 1984, due to respiratory failure secondary to lung cancer, he died at the age of 77. They buried him in the same graveyard that he had robbed all those bodies from years before in Plainsfield, and he was actually buried in between his mother and his brother. Now, he was given a headstone, but over the years, souvenir seekers would come. They would chip away at his headstone and to get little pieces of it and to take them back home. That was until the complete stone itself was just stolen in 2000. It was later recovered in June 2001 near Seattle, and it was placed in a storage in Washoe County Sheriff's Department. The gravesite itself is now unmarked, so they didn't give him a headstone because they didn't want tourists coming all the time, publicity regarding that. But it's not unknown. Of course, he was in between his mother and his brother, so you still know where he's buried because he's in between those, but he just doesn't have a stone marking it. Of course, as I said in the beginning, his story didn't end there. In 1960, the movie Psycho came out based off the novel, where the character was based off Ed. In 1974, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In 1991, Silence of the Lambs. Also, there are just so many more. I guess he really captured, writers and filmmakers' imaginations, especially with the horror genre, with his brutal and just disgusting murders and his body snatching and just all of the crimes that he committed. Also, has anyone seen American Horror Story Asylum Season 2? Brilliant season. You know the character that Zachary Quinto played? Dr. Oliver Thredson, with all the skin lamps and the bone ashtrays and things like that. I wonder who he was based off. Yeah, he was based off Ed. He just inspired so many books, so many documentaries, even music, films. He inspired so many people. And it's kind of sick when you think about it. Like, all of the crimes that he committed, the atrocities that he committed, and his name is just out there and it is so widely known. He's just a really well-known murderer and body snatcher, and I don't know, the crimes that he did were pretty gruesome, like pretty gross. I certainly wouldn't want to sit on a chair that's made of skin. I think we can all agree what I'm trying to say here is that he was just a very sick man. But yeah, that is the end of the case. I'd like to know your thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think about all this lot? Because it's definitely, a disturbing case, certainly. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content. I'd just like to let you know that I have a Patreon, link is in the description for anyone that's interested. But anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Ed Gein. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!